r/Nosleep. Posted by you/scaremeidareyou. Scary stories based on certain rules were my favorite. Ever since I was a little girl, I was obsessed with anything related to horror. Movies, books, stories, games, you name it, I loved it. I have my father to thank for that. When he went around my mother's back and took his 5-year-old daughter to see Blade for the first time, he provided the said daughter with a very entertaining hobby for years to come. Around 20 years later he was diagnosed with mild psychopathy, but I digress. My love for horror sort of categorized in years. I found myself leaning towards materials in which had some sort of rules, choices, rituals and or steps to do something or go somewhere or to avoid certain things, etc. Japanese urban legends are a goldmine on that subject. Try reading Kashima Reiko in your dorm room with public bathrooms only, then get back to me. Fun times. I guess I like to put myself in protagonist's shoes and memorize the details so that if the time comes I'm ready. The Holders? Anyone? I realize now that it's a very weird way to enjoy yourself, but it is what it is, I guess. I just got married 2 months ago and my dear husband is a total and complete coward when it comes to the supernatural. It's something I can't help making fun of, especially since the time he woke me up in the middle of the night and made me promise not to mess with any shady VHS tapes when I made him watch The Ring for the first time. So when we found our 3-story dream house for a ridiculously cheap price, which happened to be located in the middle of nowhere, I took the opportunity to make jokes about how the house was haunted. Of course I wasn't that stupid to ignore the weirdness of the situation, but you have to understand, it was the time when the wedding preparations were going on full speed and we had so little time left to prepare the house for moving. Since we have 2 lovely dogo argentinos, it was the perfect house with the perfect backyard. Besides, these things weren't actually real, right? Right? Wrong. It all started when we came back from our honeymoon. We were greeted with a red tulle, folded in the shape of a flower on the front door. We thought it was a nice gesture from our loved ones, since it's customary in our country to put red cloths and ornaments on the front door of a house in which a new bride resides. We thought nothing of it. It was still early in the morning, so I sent my husband for groceries while I mentally prepared myself for a gruesome laundry session. It wasn't until much later, in numerous back and forth trips between washer and dryer, I thought about the ornament. I went to the front door to remove it since my dogs were going to shred it to pieces anyway. I realized there was a piece of paper in the middle. The tulle was wrapped around it, and then folded in the shape of petals. My first thought was that it was a prayer or something, but the unemployed and bored journalist in me wanted to investigate. The contents of the paper had me jump up and down like a kid in a candy store. I thought my husband must have instructed one of his friends to put it here, since he knows about my adoration towards such things. I greedily sat down with a cup of coffee and a pack of cigarettes and began to read. Welcome to your new home. As your landowners, we have provided you with some rules to follow in order to ensure your safety and happiness, as well as the well-being of the estate. It is imperative that you take these rules seriously and follow to the T. Rule 1. If you are newlyweds, the bride is to keep an owl, a red veil, on her head from sunset to sunrise for 4 months, starting from the first day of moving. This rule includes all hours and activities such as showering, dressing, sleeping and intimate activities. Rule 2. If you are a couple who just had a baby and wanted a bigger house to raise your family, first of all, congratulations. Second of all, if the newborn baby is over 6 months old, you have nothing to worry about. Please enjoy your time with your family. If however the baby is younger than 6 months old, the rules are as follows. Rule 2.1. Do not leave the baby unattended while he or she is sleeping. Rule 2.2. Do not show the baby his/her reflection in the mirror. Rule 2.3. While the baby is sleeping, make sure there's an owl, a red veil, on top of the crib. Rule 2.4. The baby has to have something red on him/her at all times. Rule 2.5. If the mother is breastfeeding, it is imperative that she does so in complete privacy. Rule 2.5. If the mother is breastfeeding, she is to keep an owl, a red veil, over her head at all times. Rule 3. Do not leave dirty dishes overnight. Always make sure that you have cleaned kitchen before retiring to bed. Rule 4. Bathroom light on the first floor does not and will not work no matter what you do, which is why you're advised to avoid it after sunset. Rule 5. If there's any jewelry made of valuable metals in the house such as gold and platinum, they're to be on your person at all times. If you do not wish to wear them all the time, you are welcome to store them in a safe outside of the estate. Valuable stones are exempt of this rule. Rule 6. No matter what you see or hear, do not attempt to remove the swing in the backyard. That being said, it's best if you avoid the swing altogether after sunset. Rule 7, if you have children over the age of 6, do not let them use the swing in the backyard. Rule 8, if you have pets, it would be wise to avoid areas which make them agitated after sunset. Rule 9, the stray dogs outside are friendly and protective of the residents of the house. By all means please pet them, feed them and care for them should they need help. However, do not, under any circumstances, attempt to adopt them. They have been here for a long time and they don't need rescuing. It's best to respect their boundaries. Rule 10, refrain from yelling and screaming after sunset. If you hear a woman softly singing, you're too loud. If that happens, leave the premises immediately and do not come back before dawn. As long as the rules remain unbroken, we guarantee you that you will enjoy your life here. If you have any questions, feel free to contemplate on them on your own time, since we will furiously deny the existence of this document. Sincerely, your landowners. I let out a laugh and read the piece of paper over and over again. I mean, this was good. Even I couldn't have come up with something so detailed, and I've been reading these things since forever. I snickered at the rules which reminded me of my husband's ideas of a good marriage, such as no yelling and no more dogs in the house. He never was for subtlety. Exhausted from the housework, I decided to take a bath before dinner. The sight of my yes, the red veil, in the dirty laundry bin made me feel the all-familiar mix of excitement, curiosity and fear. I giggled to myself and surrendered my exhausted limbs to the warm bubbles. Memories from my wedding day came to me with perfect clarity. I was in my parents' house, waiting for the groom and his family to come and get me. Everyone around me crying, hugging me, acting like I was to never come back. I remember feeling like a sheep, going to slaughter. I always despised the customs and traditions in my culture. But I was the only daughter and the eldest granddaughter in the family, so I didn't want my family to not have the memories they wanted. So I didn't even argue when they wanted to perform all the traditional charades regarding my wedding. The horns and the sound of drums coming from outside informed us that the groom and his family was here and ready to receive the bride. I rolled my eyes to the excruciatingly cliché and misogynistic rituals which I'd be subjected to in a few moments. My brother came with a red sash to tie on my waist, so that everyone who saw me coming out of my father's roof would know that I was a virgin. We made eye contact and I saw his mischievous grin, ready to burst into a full-blown laughter. We had an unusual bond with no room for privacy. Just a few days ago I was giving him advice on foreplay and its importance. So yeah, the situation was awkward to say the least. He pretended to tie the sash 2 times and secured the bow on the 3rd. Relieved that we didn't cause a hilarious family scandal, I hugged him and let him go away to laugh his ass off in a more private place. My father replaced him in front of me with tears in his big blue eyes, and then the front door opened. I reflexively turned to the door just for a second and I saw the love of my life, his family and friends. And her. Time stopped. Everything and everyone else was a blur now. Our eyes locked and in just a few seconds her terrifying features burned in my head. She was dripping like she's been standing under the rain for hours. Her ragged, outdated clothes looked like they were of some other color once, yet submerged in a dark, dirty water for years. Her long black hair was dripping the same dark watery substance. But the most horrifying thing about her was her eyes. Her eyes were sewn shut at some point, but it looked so infected and decayed that some of the stitches came out and partly gave her vision. From her eyes, a black substance was leaking and it looked like she was crying. I knew she was looking at me despite the disfiguration of her face. I vaguely noticed my father praying from the background. Before I could react, he hovered the red veil over my head once, twice, then covered my head with it on the 3rd, making my vision blurred with red lace and various decorations on the cloth. In a blink of an eye, she was gone. You know you're lucky you're this tall, otherwise you would have drowned in a bathtub around 100 times by now, I heard my husband teasing me. I slowly sat up in my hazy state and smiled to the correctness of his words. I had the tendency to fall asleep in very inconvenient places. I got up to get dressed and headed to the kitchen. I thought you had no interest in those stories on Creepypasta or Nosleep. You have surprised me, I said, trying not to choke on the spaghetti I'd just shoveled into my mouth. My husband looked at me with a confused expression and said, I don't. Why, what happened? You know, the set of rules written on a piece of paper hidden in the red ornament on the front door? What rules? There are rules? Did the landowners call? His desperate attempt to deny and take the joke further made me smile. I decided to entertain him. You know those creative set of rules written in cursive as a surprise to your beautiful wife? I thought the genius behind it could only be you, but if you say you're not, then I guess you're not. I grinned, hoping he would take the bait. Since he was a terrible liar, the look on his face made me question his involvement. I got up and took the piece of paper from the counter and gave it to him. He read it a couple of times and said, "Very funny. Honestly, you're wasting your talent on amateurish pranks on your husband. You should write a book." To which I answered, "Yeah, because I had all the time in the world to pull this off, since the preparations and appointments took no time at all." So began the infamous debate of "No, you did it," which is very popular amongst preschoolers. 2 glasses of wine later, we laughed it off, coming to the conclusion that it was probably the work of our landowners, since the last paragraph specifically said not to call them about the rules. I was exhausted, so I told my husband that I was going to bed, putting him in charge of the unpleasant task of cleaning the kitchen. You see, child, not everyone is lucky in this world, not in life, not in death. Some people die a horrible death, some die very young, and some people die before they can achieve what they wanted. Spirits of these people may choose not to move on, instead they may choose to come back for revenge or to taunt the living. My grandma said with a calm voice, as if the subject was completely ordinary. It was the day I chose to complain to my favorite elder and confidant about how I didn't want any traditions or rituals for my wedding day. I told her that I really wanted to skip it and have a normal, modern day instead, and that I couldn't say anything to my parents because of how excited they were about it. In our culture, it is said that there are certain entities, vengeful entities, who never got to be a bride during their time on earth. The red veil is said to protect the bride by hiding her beauty, so that the entity won't get jealous and haunt her when she leaves her father's roof for the last time with her maiden name. I must admit, while I loved all the urban legends and weird traditions from all around the world, I never thought I would be annoyed with my own. I looked at my grandma and realized that this was important to her too. I was her favorite and she wanted to share these rituals with me. That moment I decided that it was okay, I would just let them do whatever they wanted to do. Everyone in my family aside, I could never deny a request from my grandmother. And I knew the old fox knew it too. "Child?" My grandmother's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. She looked troubled. I opened my mouth to tell her that it was fine, that they could perform whatever outdated tradition they wanted, but she cut me off. "Where is your veil, Melina?" she whispered, terrified. "You have to wear your veil." Before I could react, her whole demeanor changed. Her blue eyes lost the wisdom and light in them, replaced by an empty stare. I knew that moment that wasn't my grandmother anymore. The corner of her lips stretched impossibly wide, as if 2 invisible hooks were pulling them up. Her skin started to give out in some places, leaving her with a horrifying Glasgow smile. She opened her mouth to talk and dark blood started to spill from the corners, which was around her cheekbones now. "You should have worn your veil, Melina," she sputtered with a messed up voice that was not her own. She held my gaze for a moment before her eyes rolled back as if she was in agony, her jaw hanged open like someone was pushing it down. With a sickening sound of breaking bones and ripping muscles, her jaw fell down on the floor. I looked at her, ripped tendons and blood vessels dangling off her disfigured face. I opened my mouth to scream. I woke up to my husband shaking me, desperately trying to wake me up. My brain still trying to register that it was just a nightmare. I tried to sit up and focus on what my husband says. "You were screaming like someone was flaying you alive. I honestly thought you were dying, baby." He looked at me with worried eyes. "What the hell did you see that made you scream like that?" Ignoring the mild soreness on my jaw, I reached for the water bottle on my bedside table to ease my parched throat, while he went to turn on the lights. He looked at me, pushing a lock of hair behind my ear. Before I could speak, he exclaimed, "Oh my God! What happened to your mouth?" "What is it?" I asked with a raspy voice, jumping out of the bed. I turned on the bathroom lights and faced the mirror. First thing I noticed was that I looked like hell. I had dark circles around my eyes like I haven't slept since high school. My signature red cheeks were paler than they have ever been, making my freckles look like age spots. It was like I aged 10 years in one night. Then I looked closer and saw that there was 2 tiny red slits on the corner of my lips. Not too big, maybe 2 millimeters long, but definitely noticeable. I touched the cuts with my fingertips and winced in discomfort. I was vaguely aware of my husband speaking in the background, but I was not able to process anything. My brain was busy making 100 excuses per minute. So I'm kinda worried. I mean, yes, people do crazy shit while they're asleep, but screaming so hard that the corners of your mouth rips? Is it even possible? It could be the... I took a deep breath, turned to my husband with what I hoped to be a calm and collected face, and I attempted to ease his panic. "I'm sure it's not the first time something like that happened. Don't worry about it, baby. Besides, it's nothing my grandma's ointment can't fix." I remembered her face from my dream and internally shuddered. I tried to give him an encouraging smile, ignoring the stinging sensation. He looked like he bought it and kissed me on my forehead. "I'm just gonna have a cigarette and go back to bed, okay?" I told him, trying to keep my voice as steady as possible. I needed him to calm down and stop his panicked rambling in order for me to think clearly. I lit up my cigarette and took a long drag. I was absolutely aware of the fact that I was too well informed to ignore what happened. This was the point in horror movies where everyone in the audience rolls their eyes and says, "Oh my God, just get the hell out of there." But the rational side of my brain was stubbornly rejecting any possibility of a supernatural occurrence, relating this night with exhaustion and stress of a new home and a new life. I got distracted with a small noise that resembles two metals grinding each other. It sounded like it belonged to something that should have been oiled years ago. I turned my head to the source, which happened to be the old swing in our backyard. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw a little girl in pigtails with a plush toy on her lap. Her white knee-high socks were contrasting the darkness of the night, falling and raising in an attempt to keep the swing going. Something in my head snapped. I was too smart and too educated about this to ignore the fact that we should indeed get the hell out of here. I wasn't about to be the idiot who called out, "Are you okay, little girl?" to a malevolent entity. Nope. I said to nobody in particular and put out my cigarette. I went to our bedroom. My husband was seemingly calmer than before. I went to his side and told him the only sentence someone who has at least half a brain, let alone my experience and knowledge, should utter in a situation like this. "We have to move."